pivot tables may be one of the most important tools here in Excel. In this video, you're going to see what it is and how can we use it with a practical example. And if you want to download this spreadsheet to make this step-by-step with me, click in the link in the description down below, okay? 100% free. Just click to download. So what is a pivot table? Let's start with this, answer this simple question. A pivot table is an excellent way to just take your data set and to slice and dice in many different ways. So for example, you can take your data set and then organize it in a different way. So let me just give you a practical example. Here I have a sales report. However, let's say instead of just add up all the values that make up the total sales that I have, I instead want to see how much I just sold in the January month, for example, and then how much I sold in the February month, and let's say how much item A I just sold in the January. So look, I can keep adding criteria. The pivot table can help us to just automate this task and to organize our data set in a different view, in a different way. So let's start here with clicking any cell that you want in your data set, and then you can go here to Insert tab, and then you go to Pivot Table, you can click it, and with this new window that's gonna pop out for you, you can just check it out. If the Excel, just select the range correct. And another thing that I can select here is to just insert my pivot table in a new worksheet or in an existent worksheet. So let me just create here a new spreadsheet, okay, a new worksheet. I'm gonna click here in OK, and as you can see, Excel just create here for me a new sheet. You can just click, hold, and drag to the right. Now I can double click it and give it a name. So let's say pivot table, enter. Now let's just check it out what we have here in our pivot table. To the left of the screen, we have our pivot table area. So whenever we just add informations to just reorganize our data set, we can just see all these organized data sets that we're gonna made here in the pivot table, okay? And here to the right of the screen, we have a pivot table fields. All the columns that you have in your data set is gonna appear here. And down below, we have our areas. So we have filter, columns, rows, and values. So whenever you just get here, let's say an item, you just click, hold, and drag down to these areas that you have, filter, columns, rows, and then the total. You can just see your pivot table organizing the data for you. So let's start here with the values. I'm gonna take the total, click, hold, and drag here to the values area. I'm gonna release, okay? Now I can see my total sales. However, I do not want to see all the total sales. Let's organize it better. So I want to summarize all my total sales by, let's say, by the date. So I'm gonna click, hold, and drag down. Okay. Now in each one of the rows, I have a date, and for the values, I have my total sales. And even I can click here in this plus sign to just open, to just give you here a close look in all the data. So I have January, February, March. I have also here 2024, January, February, and so on. So okay, it's pretty much done. Let's say our first pivot table in Excel. However, I don't want to see, let's say, the years. So we're gonna click, hold, and drag out here, out of the area. Okay, now we're gonna do the same thing here for the quarters. For the months, I'm gonna keep, and date, I'm gonna do the same thing, click, hold, and drag out. That way I make sure I just have here the months, January, February, and how much I just sold for each one of the months. And here, as you guys can see, I have the same result as before. I have in my data set the year 2023, 2024. How can I know, for example, this January here is 2023 or 2024? I don't know. So maybe it's a good idea to just add another criteria here to our pivot table, so to organize it better. We can use here whether filters or columns to just add another condition. Then in this case is the year 2023 or 2024, for example. I'm gonna start here using the columns. Then we can just see how can we use the filters, okay? So let's start here with the columns. Let me just stick here with the date, click, hold, and drag to the columns. Okay, now, for example, instead of just using all the values here, year, quarter, month, and date, and as you guys can also see, once I just add here the date in the columns, I just lose my dates of the rows. However, to just make it right, I can just take here, let's say the months, click hold, and bring it here to the rows, okay? And now with the columns, I'm gonna only stick with the years, okay? The quarters, I'm gonna read it off, and the date, I'm gonna read it off too. Okay, now it's correct. We can see here that we have our three criteria. So here we have the first one, the first criteria, and then the second criteria, for example, are the months. That is the second criteria. And then we also have here a third criteria. That is the year, 2023, 2024, for example. So we can add as many as criteria, as many as conditions that we need here in our pivot table. So this is why pivot table is beautiful to use in Excel. And as I said before, I can just move, instead of using columns, for example, to just see the years, I can move the year, the date, to the filters area. So let's say I can click, hold, and drag to the left. Let's see what's going to happen. And okay, look, now instead of just have a column for the years, so 2023 and 2024, each one of in one column, I have here above a filter where I can select the 2023, for example, okay, or I can see the values of the 2024 year. So I can click, select, click OK. That way it's pretty much easy to use whether the filters or the columns. However, to be honest, I just prefer to use columns instead of filters. It's my personal opinion, okay, I just think it's easier to look up the values. So let me just click hold and drag to the right again. And yeah, now let's just create another pivot table. So let me just again click here, Insert tab, pivot tables. I'm gonna use now existent worksheet. Let me just click here in this upper arrow, and now I go here to the pivot table sheet, and I'm gonna create my new pivot table just here, and the column F, for example. Can now click here. Okay, now we have our second pivot table. And here, let's say I want to make something different. How much orders I have for each one of my warehouses. So this is an interesting fact to look at. Here we already have something to think about because I do not have a column that's just show for me the date that correspond to the quantity of orders. I have here the quantity, however here is the quantity of the item A, C, A, D, for example. However, it's not about the order. I want to know how much I have, the quantity of orders that I have. So let's say here, the first row is the first order, the second row is the second order, and so on. So each one of the rows that I have here corresponds to one order that I have. So I can use here in the values, instead of using, let's say for example, with this previous pivot table that we just did before, instead of sum a column, we can count the values of the column. So instead of sum, we can count. Let's do it. So I'm gonna click here in my pivot table number 2, and then I'm gonna use, for example, the order ID. I'm gonna click, hold, and drag to the values. And Excel is pretty smart. Excel is clever. So as you guys can see here, instead of use a sum, Excel understand what I need to do here. He just count for me the order ID. So yeah, this is the total of rows that I have, or in other words, this is the total of the orders that I have. However, instead of just stick with this total result, let's say the way, how can I change it? How can I, let's say, summarize in another way? How can I use, for example, my warehouse as a criteria? I can just take here, let's say the warehouse, and I can use whether the columns or the rows. However, I'm gonna use, for example, columns. So I click in the warehouse, click, hold, and drag, and release it in the columns. Okay, now I have here the total of orders, 183, that as we just see before, and I have here the total for Texas and the total for Oklahoma. We're done with the second pivot table. And let's just change a little bit. So I'm gonna take here the warehouse, instead of use columns, I can use rows. Let's just see how it's gonna look like. Okay, I think it's better. Huh? So here I have the total for Oklahoma and the total for Texas, and then the grand total. And one more thing that I can do, for example, I know that I have 2 years in my data set. So I have 2023 and 2024, as we just see a lot of times before. I can use here filters, like we just saw before, or even we can use columns. Let me stick now with the column, okay? So I can click, hold, and drag and release here in the columns. Okay, now I know that in 2023 and add app values of 2024, and here in this last column I have the grand total. So guys, this is how we can use a pivot table here in Excel. Let's do one more thing here, one more analysis. Let me click here in the Insert tab, pivot table, and then I'm gonna click here Extent worksheet. Clicking this upper arrow, I go here to pivot table, and now I'm gonna click here in the cell K3, for example. I'm gonna click OK. Now with this pivot table, I want to just use the product as rows. Okay, so I have here 4 different items, A, B, C, D, and I want to see how much I have sold in quantity, not in total for now, just in quantity. So I can click, hold, and drag in values. Okay, now I have the sum of all the quantities that I just sold for item A, B, C, and D. Also, instead of just seeing here the sum of the quantity, I also want to know the sum of the total sales. So let me just click here in the total, click, hold, and also I'm gonna release it in values. So now I have here 2 conditions, 2 criteria in my value area. And here, as you guys already can see, now I have 3 different criteria. The first one is the item, the second one is the quantity, and the third one is the sum of total, the total sales. So 3 different conditions. I can also add another one. So let's say instead of just see the add values of 2023 and 2024, I just want to know, I just want to see these results apart from each other. We can also use whether, for example, the filters or the columns. However, let me stick here with the filters for now, and then we can move it for, let's say, rows. Let's see if it's gonna work. Let me just use here the years, click, hold, and drag, and release here in the filter areas. Okay, now I can just filter. I don't want to see all the results, but just the values of 2023. Okay, now I just want to see the values that match with the 2024 year. Okay, now instead of using filters, let's say I want to use rows. I don't know if it's gonna work, so let's find it out. Click, hold, and release here in the rows. Okay, look, how cool is that? Now I have here my pivot table with the total here of the item A, the quantity, and the total sales. And also I have here the 2023 year and the 2024. So pivot table can do a lot of things for you. So in other words, pivot table can slice and dice for you, so it can organize for you in a lot of different ways with a bunch of criteria, a bunch of conditions, a lot of rows, a lot of columns, filters, and so on. So I hope this video tutorial can help you out, and if you have any questions, just comment down below because I can help you out. And I see you tomorrow. As every day has a new video, I see you there.